So welcome students. So we'll continue our discussion on basics of Foundry. So in the previous lecture, we established about the Foundry. The Foundry is a place where casting is done. So for casting, the input is molten metal. So molten metal is actually obtained from a furnace. So that's what we discussed in the previous lecture. Now we'll get into the actual casting process. So what is casting? So as you see in the slide, so casting is nothing but it is creating material from the scratch. So what you can do is you can use the molten metal obtained from the foundry and make it into different shapes. So the shape will depend upon the uh, object which we need. For example, if you need to make a dumbbell, then obviously the shape will be a dumbbell. So what we'll do is in sand casting, we will imprint the shape of dumbbell in the cast in the sand, as you can see here. So this is the box. I will open the highlighter. So this is the box actually. There are two boxes here. One is scoop and another one is drag. Top box and bottom box. We will fill it completely with sand, and then we will place the replica of the object which we need. For example, in our case, let's take we need a dumbbell. So what I will do is I will place the replica of dumbbell. So this figure will explain more clearly. So I will place the replica of dumbbell in the sand and I will take it out. So what happens is that I will have a cavity in sand in the shape of the dumbbell. So then what I can do, I can pour the molten metal into the box. So problem here is that you see here, just imagine without these other things. So up to what I said, I am having a object like this in the sand. But problem with this is it is completely immersed in sand. So there is no way to pour molten metal into the actual part. So for that, what we need is we need some openings to pour molten metal inside. So that's where these things come inside. So molten metal will go through here. As you can see, it will flow from here. It will go through this part and it will fill this cavity completely. And then it will come up on this. So what this process explains is that I need an opening for molten metal to get into the actual mold cavity. So this part is actually called as the mold cavity. So I need molten metal to get into the mold cavity, fill it completely and then rise above so that I know the entire cavity has been filled. So let's get into this image. So this is the part where I will be pouring the molten metal. So I will be using a ladle to pour the molten metal. Ladle is nothing but it is the container containing the molten metal. So this is the ladle. So I will pour it here. It will get into the actual part. So this is the actual part I need. So this is called as the mold cavity. As you can see here, this is actually called as the mold cavity. So when I pour molten metal, it gets inside, it flows here and it gets to the mold cavity. So once the mold cavity is completely filled, then what happens is that it will rise up through this. So hence this is called as a riser. So if you see the name, it's actually quite explanatory. So this is the pouring basin and this part is actually called as the runner. So why it's called runner is that it is where the molten metal is being poured. So it runs through this and it rises here. Hence it is called as a riser. So you have your mold cavity, pouring basin, runner and riser. So in actual representation, these are two boxes. So the top box is actually called as the coop and the bottom box is called as the drag. So both will be completely filled with sand and then you will pour the molten metal inside. So once it is poured, it gets solidified. So molten metal gets solidified and you get the required shape. So this is the outline of the sand casting process. So then there are some other parts here. As you see, there is something called as a vent. So vent is nothing but it is a hole. One minute, I will clear everything. So this part is actually nothing but this is where This is an opening into the mold cavity. This goes into the mold cavity. It's a small opening. What it does is it allows for the trapped gas inside to get out, because we are pouring molten metal inside the sand. So when it solidifies, what happens? Some gases will be evolved. So that can escape out through this vent. So if vents are not provided, what happens is that uh, the the gases starts to fill here. So once they fill and they burst out, then you will get the cavity here. If you can imagine it, so you will get some cavity here. So there will be some defects because the bubble bursts. So that's why we are providing vent to prevent the defects. So that is regarding the outline of sand casting. We will discuss further the need for other parts the subsequent lecture. Thank you, students.